Welcome back, students, to the lore of the Iron Kingdom's Warmachines and Hordes. I, of course, am Professor Caster, and of course the lore is brought to us by Privateer Press and all of their fantastic writers. Today we'll be continuing discussing the Warlocks from the Circle Orboros, as well as completing every Warlock of Orboros that we know of that's in the lore and in the game. Alrighty, looks like we're beginning with Kromac the Ravenous, Circle Thorn Warlock. Barbarian chieftain, war leader of his people, living nightmare, feaster of human flesh, murderer of untold hundreds. All of these describe Kromac the Ravenous. When he walks as a man, silence surrounds him as gathered Tharn await his command for the chance to kill or die as he wills. When Kromac draws upon the worm to transform into a beast, wild things hear the howl and leap to obey. From the deepest hearts of black wilderness, he comes seeking not conquest, but slaughter and destruction. The druids of the Circle Orboros do not count him among their number, and consider him a sword wielded only reluctantly, only not easily sheathed once drawn. Once the Tharn were human, now they enjoy the closer link to the beast of all shapes than any other mortals who walk Cain. Kromac is old enough to have witnessed how close his people came to extinction just a few short decades ago. Morrowinds claim their gods cursed the Tharn with infertility for the depravity of feasting on human flesh. Kromac saw Tharn women unable to bear young, his diminishing people pushed back into the depths of the Thornwood by the spread of the soft, feeble human woodsmen and militia whose only advantage was their numbers. It enraged him to see his proud tribe ousted from their homes, forced to hide amid the trees and shadows, and to evade both humans and trollkins who thrived and multiplied while his own race dwindled. This experience from his earliest days, this loathing felt even before he could elucidate his reasons, lies at the root of Kromac's hatred for humans and trollkins. As a youth, he witnessed his eldest sister, a fierce blood tracker boasting many kills, gunned down by a rabble of rifle-wielding soldiers on the Bramble-Rut. He mourned her passing by letting it fill him with all-consuming rage. Kromac fell upon the soldiers with an axe in each hand and slaughtered them to a man. Though he ate the flesh of their bodies, he did not feast on their hearts, for he thought to do so would give them too much honor. Even today, he will only consume the hearts of those he considers worthy foes, disdaining lesser men as meat unworthy of offering to the devourer. Kromac descended into the long hours of darkness on villages and towns within the Thornwood to slaughter all he could find. Before he reached the fullness of manhood, Kromac had accumulated an impressive collection of trophies. Something set Kromac apart from other Tharn, something more than just his birthright as eldest-born son of the chief of the Bloodsmead Hoth. The wind whispered words only he could hear, and the howls of wolves resonated in his heart even when he walked as a man. He took the path of a shaman and learned the blood rites of sacrifice. But somehow he knew there was more to learn. Kromac had, in fact, been born with the wilding, the ability to view natural world with the eyes of blackclads and harness the worm's power in a way unheard of among the Tharn. The connection to the worm, that is, the blood rite of all Tharn, grants them the power of transformation. This connection to the druidic wellspring of power, combined with the Tharn gifts to bring forth the wild savagery and strength beyond any other among his people. Yet this came at the price, invoking form of wild madness that unlocks the most primal essence of the predatory spirit. Kromac entered the beast mind when he transformed and became the Walking Death, an avatar of slaughter with axes in his hands. When Kromac takes the beast form, it seems as though the worm looks through him, and he knows only hunger and the need to kill. Krueger the Stormlord, once called Stormfather by Tharn, came to Kromac and instructed him to use this power. Kromac never formally entered the Circle Orboros as a druid. His status remains that of something other, yet he knows the ways and commands a power similar to theirs. When, in his untransformed state, he is recognized as Tharn King with great wisdom and cunning, as well as a ruthless courage. He marshals forces other Tharn can't comprehend, able to reach into the minds of man or beast to unleash the resilience and rage of the predator within. Gifted enemies beset by his power lose all reason, their magic forgotten amid the clash of primal impulses. At his command, the earth opens with hot exhalation of breath and chilling howl, groaning with the hunger to consume flesh. Sharp, jagged stones becoming like teeth. He understands lunar feast rites as deeply as any Tharn shaman, yet his exposure to the mysteries of Orboros enhances his insight. The lore he has brought from the Druids has aimed his people and led to great victories. Though Kromac did not remain under Krueger's instructions for long, he remains one of the few humans Kromac truly respects. The Stormlord returned to his people, though oaths and promises were made that would not fade with time. Kromac's unique power soon drew the attention of another great druid who would first earn and eventually betray his loyalty. Knowing the key role she played in breaking the curse of the 10 ills that afflicted his people, Kromac viewed Morvahna the Autumn Blade with a mixture of all lust and a deeper longing that unsettled him. He saw her as the salvation of his race and an immortal vision of female perfection. For years he served Morvahna as bodyguard and enforcer and watched his people return to strength. Eventually her darker side revealed itself, as her manipulation and disregard for Tharn lives disillusioned Kromac and let him see her with fresh eyes. Kromac turned his back on Morvahna and returned to the service of his old mentor, who welcomed him as a vital asset. Regardless of which Blackclad he serves, Kromac knows he was born to embody destruction and slaughter, and he has much work to do in the days ahead. Lucky enough, I've never had to face this particular monster in battle, although from the stories I've heard, when they say transformation, they're not talking him just, mentally switching out. He literally turns into what some people describe as a war beast himself. Destruction incarnate, his double axes cutting through warjacks and war beasts alike. When he switches over to beast mode, though, the only thing that you don't have to worry about is spells, because by the time he gets to that, he ain't going to be using them. Although he definitely does embody the Tharn's man-eating flesh and rage and destruction that they're so well known for in these woods. I pray that none of you ever have to run into him and fight him one-on-one, if you can avoid it. Moving on to Kromac, champion of the worm, Circle Tharn Warlock. Kromac's howl is the first and final note of a chorus of 1,000 untamed beasts, the deepest and most primal secret of the worm's chosen stir within his blood. His scattered tribes hold a great feast in his honor, for they see him as their greatest king. They offer him goblets fashioned from the skulls of victims and filled with fermented blood, together with hearts of marrow collected from the most dangerous prey. He takes the best warriors of these tribes into battle, letting them join in the carnage and to prove their dedication to the worm. He is called Kromac the Ravenous, king of all Toths and champion of the worm. Through Kromac's bond with the beast of all shapes, someday soon the nations of man will fall. For many years, the Tharn kings served the Blackclads of the Circle Orboros, believing their aims aligned with his. While Kromac respects some among them, he now refuses to serve them as an inferior and demands the respect that he is due. Kromac made binding promises to Wurmwood, Tree of Fate, as avatar of the worm. He ties to this entity bred unease among the ranking druids, who have only indirect influence over the tree's action. One of Wurmwood's far-reaching schemes resulted in Kromac battling the Trollkin chieftain Madrak Ironhide to claim the axe called Rothrok, the World Ender. Amid the strife, Kromac witnessed the worm made manifest on Cain, a blessed revelation. Since then, he has achieved mastery over his bestial form and no longer feels the need to return to his human guise. He walks amid his tribes as a hulking creature beyond the size and strength of any other chieftain, yet his every thought is his own. None who see him can doubt he is the worm's true champion. Ancient powers guide Kromac's fate and have awarded him with pivotal roles in eternal battles between civilization and the wilds. The axe he now bears is the mighty artifact with a bloody history connected to the ancestors of the Tharn. Thousands of years ago, the weapon was lost to those loyal to the worm in the last clash between great Morvahna tribes and the Kalatians. Now it has found its way back to those who would wield it to tear down the walls of mankind. Kromac takes it upon himself to reawaken the full power of Rothrok, even if the axe requires an unending tide of blood in return. Great, so now he's not only monster mode all the time, he now has his mind with it too. Perfect. And he has the axe that he stole back from Madrak Ironhide. And that axe is way more powerful than his 2 twin axes he used in his previous form. And not only that, it looks like one of his special powers is he can make everyone in his battle group way more powerful and way more armored. So that's not a good sign. Again, I hope I don't have to verse this guy in battle, because, yeah, at his speed, strength, and armor, he would just tear through me. Well, maybe. I'd be on the defensive a lot. Alright, next Warlock we're moving on to is Krueger and all of his variations. We're going to start off with Krueger the Stormseer, just because that's the earliest reports we have of Krueger. And at this stage, he's not even a Warlock. He's actually a lesser Warlock, which is, you know, like their underlings that we've talked about before. Krueger is a long-lived Warlock due to his clever strategies and willingness to sacrifice others for the cause. This version of Krueger, however, shows him as a slightly more idealistic youth when he is not so yet willing to sacrifice anyone for anything for power. This doesn't mean, of course, that he isn't above stealing a little power to boost from time to time. And again, like most young Warlocks, we do not know all that much about his youth because, well, I imagine Circle Orboros, they lose a lot of young Warlocks. They don't really write stuff down or tell people about them. At this particular stage of him, he apparently has the ability to actually draw more magical power from construct war beast around him, which, I don't know, if a rock's around you, it's almost like charging from some sort of voltaic battery or something. He also has the ability to transfer any kind of deadly damage onto his war beast as well without having to use any kind of mental force, almost like it's second nature to him. At this stage, though, it's only a very minor aspect of what his power will be in our coming readings. Speaking of which, let's move on. Krueger the Stormwrath. Universally feared and respected and disliked within the Circle's hierarchy. Krueger the Stormwrath counts no one as friend and no druid as his equal. He earned his name by performing deeds such as climbing atop the highest Watcher Peak and calling down a storm powerful enough to raise the waters of Lake Bermixdale and nearly drown the city of Orban. Krueger believes the Blackclads have become too soft and require his guidance to return to the days of plague and flood. Born in a small village north of Seoul, Krueger is among the few who have survived the wilding and protectorate of Meneth. The firstborn of the Midnight Priest, Krueger was quickly condemned when he began manifesting his strange gifts. Proclaiming him the spawn of the Devourer, Krueger's father tied him to the stake and prepared to burn him alive. Druids of the Circle intervened with bloody swiftness. They took the boy to a hidden dwelling near the ruins of Arkinia to be tutored by Mohsar, the Desert Walker, a harsh master renowned for his teaching the power of desert and ocean by cruel example. He once stripped Krueger and abandoned him in the desert hills east of Arkinia, forcing him to return using his own strength and cunning. Krueger delights in bringing suffering into the cities of humanity. He would shatter the walls of Seoul and Caspia and drive the inhabitants out into the gulf to drown. The Stormwrath holds a particular scorn for Meneth and hopes to wipe all trace of the god's despicable sycophants from the face of Cain. Baptized in the blood of midnights, Krueger's great spear contains the tongue of the worm, an endless lightning storm held captive in the heart of its wooden shaft. Krueger revels in the Devourer more than his peers. He has attended the savage rites of Tharn and other berserker tribes on the fringes of humanity, offering human sacrifices on druid stones and standing awash in the blood to gnaw on the hearts of the slain. Krueger fully embraced the destructive energies he has learned to unleash. The Stormwrath rides a constant wave of barely restrained fury, visible to anyone brave enough to look into his eyes. His deep and unquenchable rage will be satisfied only when every institution of civilized man lies crumbled, burned, or drowned at his feet. This particular Warlock I have versed actually many a time. He is swift, he is fast, he has the ability of lightning, so I recommend you ground yourself to anything when you're fighting up against him. I've watched entire units just be decimated by an arc of explosion just jumping straight through the unit. It has been unsettling, and the smell of burnt, electrocuted flesh is not something that I would like to recall again. Brings back memories that we will not be going over today in this class. Let's move on to Krueger the Stormlord, Circle Black-clad Warlock. Even the three omnipotents of the Circle Orboros admit Krueger is among the most powerful of their order. Moreover, he has the vision to apprehend the greatness does not come as a reward for humility and silent dedication. He intends to rattle the Circle Orboros like a rickety house caught in the storm. If he makes enemies of the most powerful individuals of Western Amoran in the process, so be it. Krueger lost patience with the Omnipotents after the death of the Omnipotent Orgonus, predecessor of Lordus. He expected to join their number, but then was denied. His path would have been easier with the proper rank and authority, but the work ahead is too important for eternal bickering to stand in his way. It was after he came to the aid of Kromac the Ravenous and the Thornwood that Krueger began to realize how limited his perspective had become. How could he grasp larger forces at work when tied down to meaningless errands and petty scheming? He knows now the Omnipotent's game is to sit in the background spinning their spider webs while keeping subordinates ignorant of the deeper follies in which the circle has tumbled. Krueger believes himself to be the only man who can make a lasting change in the world. He will take the steps the rest of his peers are too cowardly to attempt. The Stormlord proved his audacity after he decided his order had been too compliant about the dragons corrupting Orboros. Rather than seeking to confront Everblight, Krueger defied the Omnipotent's order and brought the matter before another dragon. Blightergast listened to Krueger's describe the threat Everblight represented to the dragon's alliance against Lord Torek, prompting other members of that alliance to stir again for the first time in centuries. Waking up the dragons, perfect. Though unsuccessful in destroying Everblight, Krueger's action did cause the disembodied dragon many setbacks and slowed the spread of its legion. Furthermore, he accomplished his secondary goal of weakening the other dragons, as well as Torek himself, all of whom were injured in the clash. Krueger considers the disaster and widespread destruction that came of this a necessary price, for he believes the aftermath will allow them to strike the first significant blow against civilization in his order's long history. The only question is whether the Circle can survive the days ahead to see its ultimate goal fulfilled. Krueger has gathered his own army, its ranks filled with those discontent with their place in the Circle's hierarchy or drawn to the Stormlord's bold and uncompromising vision. Bringing lightning and storm, blood and battle, he promises his followers to return the Circle to its primordial roots, where the weak make way for the strong and where druids are free to drink deeply from nature's unchecked power. I've also gone up against this guy a number of times as well. All ranged weapons with this man's ability to control winds and storms around him are about near useless. By the time you can even use your ranged weapon, you're already up in melee range anyway, so there's almost no point. And artillery barrages are out of the question because he can just move freaking bombs wherever he sees fit to land. And again, he's also a master of electricity, so if you have anything that's affected by electricity, i.e. warjacks, or i.e. human flesh, it will just remove them off the field anyway, with a disgusting, smoldering, sizzling noise of electricity as it cracks through flesh. And on top of that, he is a pretty fantastic magic user as well. Alright, moving on to his teacher. Mohsar, the Desert Walker, Circle Black-clad Warlock. Of the three omnipotents presiding over the Circle Orboros, the eldest and most enigmatic is Mohsar, the Desert Walker. The Desert Walker believes the bitter waste of the Bloodstone Marches perfectly reflects Orboros' myriad nature. The unforgiving power of nature pervades this climate, and the desert shrugs off all feeble efforts of civilization to hold it at bay. No city can outlast the shifting dunes, and Mohsar there is no beauty purer than the cleansing wrath of a sandstorm. Mohsar's milky eyes mark him as blind. This trait hinders him little, however. His awareness of Orboros is perfect. Letting his conscience flow into his surroundings, he takes in the entity of landscapes around him. The ley lines answer to his will, and through them, he has a far better grasp of places both near and far than he could have ever attained with his eyes alone. Mohsar has learned to manifest the tremendous power of his environment. The land cracks open at his command to swallow enemies whole. Pillars of salt erupt to block narrow passes, and blistering heat hammers down from the sky to punish beasts and machines alike. Even more terrifying is that these powers seem to cost him very little, as if the greatest feats of natural energies require nothing more than a stray thought while walking the shifting sands. Mohsar's loathing of humanity is legendary. He barely tolerates interactions with even his fellow Blackclads, and only when absolutely necessary. Those within the Order who learn Mohsar's tutored Krueger immediately gain insight into the metal of the Stormlord's soul. Mohsar inflicts a cruel savagery upon his apprentice in an effort to grind him into perfection, raise away his flaws, and elevate him bleeding and screaming to the heights of his inner potential. That Krueger has become so formidable is proof that Mohsar's method. Relentless as the sun itself, Mohsar emanates scornful disregard as palpable as hot wind blowing across the dunes. For long decades, Mohsar was rarely seen at the gatherings of the other leaders of the Circle Orboros. but recent events revealed his trend. It seems his blind eyes have shown him the shadows of black clouds on the other omnipotents failed to perceive. It was Mohsar who revealed the threat posed by Cain by the hole in reality attached to the void seer Mordecai of the Scorn. Mohsar was also the one who gathered the omnipotents in 609 AR to prevent the full manifestation the devourer worm in the bloodstone marches through that breach. He has shown no desire to retreat back into the waste sense, though his presence causes discomfort for most of his peers. Others in the Order realize Mohsar is among the few with the strength of will to deal with fringe allies like the Stormlords and Wurmwood. Given the scope of this task before them, now more than ever, Circle requires his stern leadership and an inexhaustible mystical power. I've actually ever gone up against Mohsar once, and honestly, I was so far away from him, I didn't even realize he was blind. Although, as it said, it doesn't affect him at all, because you can see the natural world around him as easily as you can feel the wind on your skin. His salt pillars create a whole issue, because they're not just a cloud. They are a pillar that you have to clock into to get through. I would also say I think he's probably the most powerful magic user that we've run into in the Druids as well. So look out for this guy. He may look like an old shriveled up man, but he is definitely a deadly one. Let's move on to Morvahna the Autumn Blade, Circle Blackclad Warlock. Morvahna culls the living and restores the dying with equal skill. Forests spring forth at her command and tear her foes asunder as the trees draw sustenance from the last flows of life's blood. She is the Autumn Blade, whose arrival portends the dark turning of the year. No druid willingly earns her enmity, and many seek her favor. Known as the woman of great intelligence, ambition, and persuasive charm, Morvahna revels in the intrigue within the upper ranks of the Circle Orboros, and sees her eventual ascension to omnipotent as a foregone conclusion. With a seductive smile, a caress, and a calm word, she achieves more than others manage with armies or full brunt of elemental forces. Morvahna was inducted in the mysteries of spring and autumn from infancy. She matured in isolation among druids of the far south on an unnamed island off Mercer coast. Her sect knew that across the waters dragons awaited, Lord Turok in the west and Blightergast in the north. She has wrestled with the blight and experimented with druidic powers to try and cleanse the outer scarred isles of it. Her territory has shifted north and expanded over decades on the grounds of sacred sites others once claimed now stand forest watered with the blood of Morvahna's rivals. Of her peers, only Krueger has dared challenge her directly, even stealing the loyalty of one of her most formidable allies, Kromac the Ravenous. The timing of this was poor, as Morvahna had been at the forefront of the Circle's battles against the Legion of Everblight. As a pragmatic woman, she found help elsewhere, convincing Kaya the Moonhunter to assist her. Morvahna has endured a number of difficult setbacks against the Legion, including the Battle of the Castle of the Keys, the subsequent pursuit of the Legion forces north, and the efforts to keep Everblight's minions from the disembodied Athank, secured first by the Krix and later by Signar. She blames Krueger for the Order's botched attempts to prevent the expansion of Everblight's power, and the Stormlord diverted critical assets from the fight with his own unrelated schemes, and his plan to unleash the dragons led only to widespread destruction. Morvahna's primary flaw is her arrogance. She often underestimates others, relying on manipulation over true loyalty. She has no inclination of deeper attachments. She is willing to stand at the gateway between life and death and feels mentally qualified to judge who should live or who will be destroyed. I've actually never gone up against Morvahna, at least not this rendition of her. But from what the archives say, she has some interesting spells, such as the ability to pull living souls to increase her magic power, or use her magic power to help bring people back from the dead for her own army, or use people dying on the field to just pop into woods and create entire forests out of armies that are being killed by her own men. It's actually really interesting and terrifying. Moving on to Morvahna, the Dawn Shadow, Circle Blackclad Warlock. Nature's cycles are inherently contradictory. With night turning to day and life to death and moments, Morvahna balances upon the sharp divide between light and dark, life and death, strength and weakness. She draws her strength from the rhythms of the natural world and yet invokes her power to cull enemies of the Circle Orboros, cutting the strands of fate, tying them to Cain. More than most, she possesses a keen understanding of the power of blood and sacrifice and can harness the most primal energies to advance her agenda. Morvahna is counted among the most politically shrewd of the Circle's leaders, a woman who has accumulated tremendous influence and power while navigating the sometimes treacherous upper echelons of the organization. While some of her rivals cannot see past her ambitions and her facilities to manipulation, she has bent all her considerable power towards the destruction of the Order's enemies. Foremost among them is the Legion of Everblight. Her political machinations suffered a slight setback after failed attempts to eliminate her greatest rival, Krueger the Stormlord. That he must pay for his disobedience seemed a foregone conclusion, as the Stormlord had defied not one, but all three of the Omnipotents in his quest to ally with Blighterghast and the other dragons. Yet even when the Grand Conclave found Krueger guilty and sentenced him to death, Wurmwood's intervention preserved him. The unexpected failure did not deter Morvahna, but only forced her to adapt and change her tactics. She has been seen infighting divided the ranks and created further division, and she shifted her goals to restore her power based through subtler means, all while coordinating strikes against the enemies that have become an ever-escalating threat. While her ambitions is undiminished, Morvahna has felt compelled to enter into alliance she might have once seemed unthinkable. She quickly restored her standing among her peers, regaining influences with the alacrity no other Blackclad could have managed. Krueger's more recent failures to eliminate Everblight has reinvigorated Morvahna. Her rival's risky gambit left him unable to resist Dawnshadow's maneuvering. She has played the part of cunning leader and manipulator, absorbing some of his domain into her own or allocating them into other druids she counts as friends and allies. As has long been her talent, she has turned the recent chaos within the Order to her benefit. The Dawnshadow now joins battle with renewed purpose, wielding all the tremendous power at her disposal. Astride her Skirovic, mountain goat, the power of life and blood is hers to command, and those who follow her entrust their lives to her discretion. The ebb and flow of the natural order rest within Morvahna's fingertips, guiding her towards her destiny. I am lucky enough never have to gone up against this particular version of Morvahna, but judging by the archives, her with her giant mountain goat makes her incredibly fast. She also can remove scars on the field of battle when her men are dying around her. She also has the ability to manipulate how well her attacks are going from the men around her just by cutting herself. So, blood magic, of course. Not only that, she has the power to, of course, control the battlefield, creating fogs and all sorts of fun stuff that makes her very, very deadly, quick, and a very hard warlock to track down.
Let's talk about Tanith, the Feral Song, Circle Blackclad Warlock. Fearless, strong, and unrelenting, Tanith the Feral Song has emerged as one of the most efficient enforcers belonging to the Circle Orboros. She excels at those duties requiring extra muscle and a strong stomach, accepting tasks some young Blackclads are loath to do. Demanding the absolute loyalty from her subordinates that she gives to her superiors, Tanith never leaves an appointed task unfinished, be it striking a settlement that threatens to encroach the Circle's border, or punishing former allies for acts of incompetence or outright rebellion. Her powers stem from the divide between the forces of life and death, and she walks this line with the confidence many within her order find unnerving. As a child undergoing the wilding, Tanith was ostracized and eventually driven from her home by parents who did not understand the manifestations of her connection to Orboros. Only when the druids of the Circle Orboros took her in did she come to see the power of her existence. Eventually, she was placed under the tutelage of Werner, the Nightbringer, one of the Order's more exclusive and ruthless potents, who shaped Tanith from a fearful child into an effective and dispassionate killer. Venor had long been both feared and respected among his peers, taking care of unpleasant tasks others shied away from or could not trust to their subordinates. Eventually, the punishment of druids who had strayed from their duties or betrayal the trust of the Circle. Tanith has taken up Werner's cause and has earned a reputation of solving difficult problems. Upon completing her training, Werner presented her with a legendary Staff of Fate, a weapon crafted from a living branch of Wurmwood. Still connected to the power of being, the This weapon radiates the aura of unmistakable malice and hunger. There are those within the upper echelons of the circle who believe the Staff of Fate to be less a gift and more a tool of transformation and instruction, one that allows the Nightbringer to continue his pupil's dark education and evolution into pure weapon of the Circle Orboros. Unlike many Blackclads, Tanith reveres the Devourer Worm as more a primal font of the power Orboros. She delves deep into the mysteries of the beast of all shapes, embracing the predatory spirit inherited into the dark paths of the wilds. From Werner, she has learned the dark rites of the worm, forgotten by many among her order, and through the ancient well of knowledge she draws the power to carry out her grim tasks. While she has no quarrels with other Blackclads, Tanith's intensity and radical devotion to the Devourer has distanced her from her peers. She values the lives of those warriors and beasts she commands in battle, but she is not above sacrificing her forces to achieve her aims, if necessary. On more than one occasion, she has returned from a mission a bloodied sole survivor, yet she is ever eager to carry out her next mission. Well, fortunately, I have never actually versed up against Tanith the Feral Song either, but according to the archives, she has the ability to blend in with forest stuff, making her nigh invisible. She has the ability with her ranged weapons to completely ignore things like walls and bushes from being attacked from a ranged attack. And her weapon not only is, of course, powerful for any kind of warlock weapon, but it also has a annoying habit of putting Shadowbind on somebody. And Shadowbind is a very useful spell, especially among the druids, that actually makes people almost turn visible, as if they're melding in and out from cane to arcane, lowering defenses, lowering shields. It's very annoying to try to get off. Outside of that, of course, she is definitely more of a melee type caster who wants to get in there, kill a lot of stuff, have her people do the same, and get out before she can be hit. Of course, as every warlock, very dangerous to take on hand to hand. Let's move on. Bradigus Thorol the Rune Carver, Circle Blackclad Warlock. Bradigus Thorol is a master of stone and elemental power, an expert craftsman well versed in the esoteric arts required to construct the great standing stones and celestial fulcrums that harness Kane's geomatic forces. Designed to last millennia, these stones manipulated the flow of the world's energy, the very blood of Orboros, directing it accordingly to Thorol's complex designs. Without his tireless efforts, the recent conflicts across Western Amoran would have robbed the Circle of one of its most vital resources. The sites that Thorol's towering monuments invariably within the deepest wilderness where Kane's energies are the most primal are among the Circle's most sacred places. Often the Order must reclaim these sites from enemies who would despoil the power for their own ends. Such tasks bring Thorol into the domain of many Blackclads who seek to add to his power to their own, but the Rune Carver is unmoved by attempts to curry his favor. Thorol's work is now more important than ever, as recent events have wounded the Leylines network in ways previously unimagined. These disturbances include the emergence of the machine cultist of the Convergence of Cyrus, who drink of Orboros' power to fuel their corrupt work, the Dragon Blight that has been spread through many critical nodes in an effort to stop the Dragon of Everblight, and the emergence of the Beast of All Shapes itself on Kane, which racked the Bloodstone marches with unnatural storms and quakes. If not for the ceaseless work of Thorol and his hand-picked stone shapers, there could be no hope of restoring the fractured Leyline network left in the wake of these disasters. It has taken him years to undo the damage that was inflicted in a matter of a few short hours, and there remains much still to be done. Thorol has no qualms about cooperating with other Blackclads to focus on the project at hand, but otherwise he eschews political machination within the Circle. Overall, he prefers the silent company of wolves, or the gentle hum of the power flowing through the ley lines to the grating sound of the spoken word. Comfortable with his place in the organization and unyielding in the face of adversity, he focuses on whatever work is before him. He is a steadfast and loyal leader who diligently tends to his responsibilities, knowing his labors are essential to the smooth running of the entire order. Without the ley line network, the Circle Orboros would have only a fraction of its reach and power. Only in battle does Thorol break from his aloof demeanor. To him, combat is an outlet or unexpressed rage at those who would disrupt or destroy his greater work. The very earth responds to his will, and he easily wields the titanic power flowing beneath the surface of Cain. At his command, massive rocks rise from the ground to obliterate men and beasts, and the mighty wolves stride forth from the wilderness to crush the enemies between their stony fists. I've actually faced Bradigus numerous times and been hit with those stones a lot more than I would like to admit, and tell you, they sting. Also, his affinity just to use constructs over the war beast is nice in one regard, but terrible in the next. Partially because, it's easy to attack a wild beast, but when it comes to, people hitting rocks, they do a lot less damage for a lot more work. Also, in the archives it says, because he works with primary just constructs, he has an affinity to make them use their unnatural animuses to help aid him in battle more cheaply without his direct intervention. So, of course, he's very dangerous, as every warlock. Moving on to Una the Falconer. As we've come across in many of our courses, Una the Falconer is actually a journeyman warlock, which, of course, how the archives find information about such early on warlocks, I will never know. Let's begin. Through the eyes of her soaring beast, Una the Falconer gazes down upon the wilderness of western Imoran. Griffins and birds of prey leap into the sky at her command and fill the airs with their shrieks. To Una's enemies, this sound heralds death from the skies. To her, this is a song of victory. Guided by her will, Una's falcons strike with keen accuracy, darting among the enemies and slashing with deadly talons before returning to their master. Each of her birds was raised from an egg, plucked by her hand from a remote nest. She has trained them to serve with fearsome efficiency as both tools of the hunt and weapons of war. In battle she sends these sharp-eyed scouts aloft, and through them she observes the enemies from above to identify weaknesses in their formation. Whenever she travels, she keeps her falcons close, her constant companions and instruments of her will. Born among the Balatov people of Kodor's northern Kovacs hills, Una was trained as a child in their ancient traditions of hunting with falcons. She showed extraordinary talent for handling the dangerous birds, directing them with proficiency beyond her years. It was her connection with these birds that shaped her wilding. As a young teen, Una discovered she was able to touch the minds and command them. Detecting her wilding, the northern Blacklads took Una into their ranks. Her mentor, a beastmaster of considerable power, taught her to expand her connection with her falcons into an affinity for the griffins favored by the Circle. Soon she went to serve under other beastmasters, overseeing the Order's far-flung griffin roosts, traveling to the far corners of Imoran to learn how these beasts are protected, fledged, and readied for battle. Though such tasks were considered her duty as a junior druid, Una took to the work with uncommon passion. Tending to these great predators, she has scaled the Rotten Horn and delved into the frozen Scarfell. Her talent with flying beasts is exceptional. Under her control, they strike with the same unsettling precision as her falcons. These affinities seem to Una a natural extension of many years of working closely with small birds of prey, and her griffins feel such a strong connection to her that they instinctively protect her at all cost. There is nothing Una enjoys more than linking her mind to a soaring falcon or a griffin as it touches the skies. Other druids often find her reserved and uninterested, but they are unable to comprehend the joy she finds in communion with her beast. Her beloved griffins and falcons grant her both an exhilaration of flight and the satisfaction of destroying her enemies. The skill and efficiency with which she has accomplished all challenges set before her has earned her notice among the upper echelons, who predict her talent foreshadow her ascendancy as one of the greatest beastmasters of the Circle Orboros. I have never actually went up against Una the Falconer before, at least not to my knowledge. Unless, of course, I've suffered a lot of concussions, so I do forget things every now and again. According to the archives, this particular version of her in her younger form, she actually only used birds exclusively as her assistant war beast. Which makes sense since she is called the Falconer. Also, she uses those falcons to great effect, being able to just see through everything, because she's seeing everything from a bird's eye view, top to bottom. So things like cloud effects, forests, intermediate models, she just sees right through them, because they're technically not there from above. Let's move on to her adult form, shall we? Una, the Sky Hunter, Circle Black-clad Warlock. No longer a junior druid learning the ways of the world, Una has grown into a powerful member of the Circle Orboros. Through her time tending the various griffin roosts of the Circle, she has developed an unparalleled affinity with the winged beast and employs them to wrest the skies from any who oppose her upon the newly acquired territories. With the griffins as her weapons, she cuts down opponents with merciless speed and accuracy gifted to all great hunters of the devourer worm. Griffins are a precious commodity of the Circle Orboros. Given the beast's limited population, Blackclads have worked diligently over the years to maintain sufficient roosts to preserve them. Acquiring young griffins has been an ongoing struggle, and with the Circle's recent setbacks, the need to expand their roosts has never been greater. With this in mind, several years ago, Una undertook a bold move, venturing beyond the fringes of the leyline network in hopes to expand breeding efforts into new lands. When Una first entered the unknown wilds, she kept a regular contact with other members of the Order, relaying her movements and finding through messages delivered by hawks that accompanied her. Her journey began in the northern limits of the Order's territory, and from these travels deep into the frozen tundra and mountain ranges that crown Imoran. Early successes proved the wisdom of this difficult endeavor. To the surprise of her skeptical superiors, she managed to find several previously unknown roosts. This discovery went against the common belief that it was only the Blackclad's care that had prevented the extinction of the griffins, and it spurred her to venture even deeper into the unexplored territories. Her messages grew infrequent and finally ceased altogether. For almost 2 years, no member of the Circle had any word from Una, and many believed her dead, killed either by the harsh northern environs or by the very griffins she sought to secure. The Order resigned itself to yet another loss, and the Una's territories and responsibilities were given to the others to manage. Then one day she reappeared from the northern borders of omnipotent Delakov's domain, possessed of a new confidence and mature power. During her time in isolation, Una refined her arcane command over the elements. She is now able to call upon the howling gales and updrafts of the highest mountain peaks to shape the flow of battle and cut apart her foes with the wind's razor edge. While Una has said little about her travels beyond the reach of the Order's territory, her eyes are now more distant and cold than ever. The deep changes in her young druid are undeniable, as are her formidable powers over wind and sky. I've never actually versed this particular warlock either. However, in the archives, we have some interesting information, such as her control over griffins have made them even more mobile than griffins usually are, and griffins are a flying creature, so also terrifying. Also, fun fact, when they say she uses the wind as a weapon, they're not kidding. Her wind is the weapon. It's not like a bow. It's not like a gun. It's literally the wind. And she uses it with profound perfection, which is kind of remarkable because most warlocks or war casters, for that matter, usually have to cast spells to be able to control the wind. Usually a sign importance or some sort of razor wind spell. But nope, she just uses it with crazy accuracy. And I believe all the rest of her actual spells are also very closely related to wind. Alright, let's move on to the last warlock in our archives that we will be discussing. Wurmwood, Tree of Fate, and Cassius the Oathkeeper. Circle Warlock and Black-clad Solo. The druids of the Circle Orboros have made countless alliances and bargains and have manipulated myriad groups to ensure their agendas. But some of these arrangements have been far more lasting than others. The first omnipotent sealed ominous bargains with manifestations of the worm given form on Cain, entities such as the Lord of Feast and Wurmwood, also called the Tree of Fate. These primal entities proved a formidable but demanding allies. Before Meneth gave humanity its first law and taught them to erect its first wall, the carnivorous tree named Wurmwood had taken root. Unlike most trees, it was thirsty for blood and quickly manifested an unusual, deep, and predatory intelligence. These first druids used their influence to persuade the devourer cultists to conduct sacrifices below the spread of its branches. The The scattered tribes of the hinterlands traveled great distances to pour libations of blood upon the soil above its roots, and hang skeletal offerings from its leafless limbs. These terrible rites culminated in a great ritual wherein 1,000 men and beasts were bled out to give the tree a worthy feast. Unfettered powers of creation thrummed in the air as the roots burst forth to entwine itself around the young druid through which the tree spoke its name. The rite gave Wurmwood a human voice. In the first communion, a lasting pact was sealed. Only the omnipotents know the exact nature of this agreement, but since the time one druid in every age must uphold the special covenant with the Tree of Fate, the druid gives over life and soul to become a conduit between Wurmwood and the human master of the Circle Orboros. Wormwood's unfathomable mind does not perceive Cain or even the passage of days as mortals do, and so requires an intermediary, a filterer to lesser minds fixed in time. Effortlessly tapping into the natural energies below the skin of the world, the tree comes and goes at its whim. Though it appears to be permanently rooted, it can disappear in a shimmer of fog and manifest elsewhere. Its ability to drink from the ley lines and to wield the power to affect the world are vast and fearsome, putting even the omnipotents to shame. Recent years have seen the Wurmwood yield this power and banish entire armies and send them where it wills. For generations, Wurmwood has made its home at the heart of various dark forests and on remote mountains. Devourer cultists seek out to nourish their primal gods with the blood of sacrifice. The ranking druids of the Circle Orboros periodically offer their own supplications in exchange for its wisdom. Wurmwood is invited to attend the highest circle deliberations, where it has special privileges. When the omnipotents cannot unanimously agree, Wurmwood is empowered to intervene, providing its unique perspective on the world. Mortal flesh ages, and when the time comes for Wurmwood to choose a new conduit, the potent gathers their wilders. These novice druids are chosen for their youth, stamina, and mystical potential. Being selected for this group is a dubious honor. Leading druids may arrange for favored subordinates to be absent from the selection ceremony. On the night of the Giramor feast, a sacred rite celebration, one of the most ancient champions of the Devourer Worm, Wurmwood, casts aside its old oathkeeper who perishes. At the moment, Wurmwood's roots entwine around its selected candidate, who speaks the ancient word of the oath. Once this vow is completed, the tree integrates itself into the druid's flesh. The Oathkeeper's personality lingers beyond this joining. Each generation the tree's perspective is colored by the mind of its conduit. Cassius, the current chosen, was a cunning and intuitive druid who earned the jealous ire of his master over some perceived affront. The old master thought this slight avenged when Wurmwood selected his troublesome apprentice, but his satisfaction was short-lived. The mentor soon perished and was forgotten, while Cassius persists. Perhaps as a result of his influence, Wurmwood has been increasingly active in recent decades. Wurmwood's goals often coincide with those of the Circle Orboros, but its ultimate ends are its own. It pursues an agenda heedless of the Circle's stated aim, and at times the tree's actions run contrary to the desires of the omnipotents. This has never been more evident than when the tree and its conduit conspired to release the Devourer Worm physically on Cain. Only with the combined efforts of the omnipotents and powerful Trollkin mystics prevented the worm from rampaging on Cain. Such actions have sustained the relationship between Wurmwood and the Circle's leadership. It is too potent an ally for them to disregard. Though the tree accepts any sacrifice, it thrives best on blood and souls of its own enemies. The war host it leads seem to become particularly vicious when it urges them onward. In every conflict, the Tree of Fate judges the worth of the fallen, allies and enemies alike, as it soaks its roots with their gore. Its violence suggests the end awaiting all things should the Devourer fully awaken. I can't say I've ever run into a man-eating tree before, outside the little tiny ones that the druids like to use that can absorb souls and people channel spells through it. I guess this might just be the grandfather of those types of trees. In the archives it says this thing even can absorb somebody's soul, making it even more of a terror on the battlefield. Terror being the prime word, since it is technically just a living tree. Also even more terrifying if you were just on an expedition in the middle of some dark forest somewhere and you ran into one of the oldest living used warlocks of Orboros and his druid apprentice to just destroy your entire army or just make it disappear and pop up somewhere else. Truly terrifying to behold. Alrighty, class, that concludes every known Circle of Orboros warlock that has been brought to the forefront in our archives. If any more warlocks are discovered in the near future, of course we will be doing a side course on them or bringing them up eventually in one of our courses. Prepare for next week. We'll be finishing off all the warcasters for Kodor, so that should be fun. And as always, your homework will be to like, subscribe, and let your friends know about this course so we can continue to grow this channel and I can continue to bring out this phenomenal lore on war machines, hordes, and of course the Iron Kingdoms, brought to you by the fantastic writers at Privateer Press. And as always, class dismissed. We'll see you next week.